In the early 1800s, European missionaries began to arrive on African shores. They came by sea, British, French, Portuguese, Belgian, and German missionaries, carrying the Bible in one hand and a message of salvation in the other. They said God had sent them to bring light to the dark continent. They told Africans that their old religions were filled with superstition and that Christianity would bring peace, love, and hope. The missionaries promised that if Africans accepted Jesus Christ, their suffering, poverty, and fear of spirits would end. They preached that those who believe in Jesus will be blessed on earth and in heaven. At first, many Africans were curious and even excited. They saw the missionaries as kind strangers who built schools, treated the sick, and brought new forms of knowledge. Some chiefs allowed them to settle, thinking they were harmless teachers. But behind the cross came a new kind of power, a power that would later be used to control both body and mind. After the missionaries came the traders and the soldiers. The missionaries built churches, the colonizers built forts and barracks. The missionaries said, "Love your neighbor." The soldiers said, "Obey our flag." The two worked hand in hand, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Missionaries softened the people's hearts with the message of faith and forgiveness, and when resistance was low, the colonial governments took control. Africans were told that obedience was a Christian duty. Verses from the Bible like "Servants, obey your masters" were used to make Africans accept foreign rule. The new message sounded holy, but it carried a hidden command: do not fight the white man, he is sent by God. While the missionaries built churches and schools, the colonizers took over lands, minerals, and trade routes. The gun and the Bible walked together. One conquered the body, the other conquered the mind. An African proverb from that time said, "When the white man came to Africa, he had the Bible and we had the land." He taught us to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, he had the land and we had the Bible. Before the missionaries arrived, Africans already had rich spiritual traditions. They worshipped one creator through different names: Olodumare, Chukwu, Nyame, Ngai Katonda, and many others. They respected ancestors, spirits, and nature. But the missionaries called these beliefs evil, pagan, or satanic. Sacred forests were cut down, traditional shrines were destroyed, and priests of African religions were shamed or punished. Africans were told to take Christian names: John, Mary, Peter, and to stop using their native ones. To be educated, one had to become Christian. To work for the colonial government, one had to be baptized. Children in mission schools were taught to despise their language and culture. They were punished for speaking their mother tongue. They were told that European clothes, names, and ways were signs of civilization. This destroyed the African sense of pride. People began to believe that to be civilized, one had to act like the colonizer. Christianity became a path to acceptance, not to freedom. Those who rejected it were labeled rebels or savages. In many places, chiefs who refused Christianity lost their power or were removed. The spirit of resistance was slowly replaced with a spirit of submission. As colonial rule grew stronger, the church became one of its greatest tools. Missionaries often worked closely with colonial administrators. They opened mission stations that doubled as centers of control. In their sermons, Africans were told to be humble and obedient. They were taught that rebellion was a sin and that suffering was part of God's plan. "Turn the other cheek," the missionaries said, even as Africans were whipped or taxed unfairly. Colonial governors loved this message because it made people easier to rule. The church also helped justify European domination. They said Africans were uncivilized and needed to be guided like children. They used the Bible to support their rule, saying that God has chosen the white man to bring light to the world. During revolts and protests, like the Maji Maji Rebellion in Tanzania, 1905, and the Mau Mau Uprising in Kenya, 1952, some missionaries called the rebels sinners instead of freedom fighters. The church buildings became places of peace for the colonizers, but prisons of silence for the Africans who wanted justice. But not all Africans accepted this false version of Christianity. Some began to understand that Jesus' true message was about freedom, love, and justice, not slavery. African preachers began to rise. They preached that the same Bible used to control them also said that all people are equal before God. In Congo, Simon Kimbangu started a spiritual movement in 1921. He said God had not abandoned Africans, that they could worship him in their own way. The Belgian rulers saw him as a threat and imprisoned him for life. In Nigeria, Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther, a former slave who became the first African Anglican bishop, translated the Bible into Yoruba. He tried to make Christianity speak to the African soul, but European church leaders later removed him because they did not want Africans leading their own church. In South Africa, preachers like Isaiah Shembe founded the Nazarite Church, mixing African songs, dress, and dance with Christian worship. These movements proved that Africans could believe in God without rejecting their roots. The rise of African-led churches was the beginning of spiritual independence, a step that later inspired political independence across the continent. Even after colonialism ended in the mid-20th century, Christianity remained deeply rooted in Africa. Today, more than half of all Africans identify as Christians. The religion brought both light and shadow. It built schools, hospitals, and helped spread literacy. But it also broke traditions, erased languages, and helped colonizers rule. Many African Christians today still struggle with this truth. Some are now trying to reconnect their faith with African identity, mixing Christian worship with local music, proverbs, and culture. Across the continent, churches are growing, but so is the call for a decolonized faith, a Christianity that stands for justice, equality, and African pride. Africans now understand that their faith should not be used to silence them, but to empower them to fight against oppression and injustice. The story of Christianity in Africa is one of pain and power. It began with promises of peace and salvation, but was used by colonizers as a chain around African freedom. Yet from that same faith, Africans rose to find their strength. They discovered that true Christianity does not belong to Europe or Africa. It belongs to all who seek truth and justice. The same Bible that once silenced Africans now inspires them to speak. The same faith that once taught submission now fuels liberation.